iThrive's Geeky Podcast, wherein we discuss various research topics and try to answer various questions. So, in the last episode, we had discussed breastfeeding and its importance in building the gut microbiome. And today, I am the Chief of Research and Development, Manali Chindarkar, with the researcher Anagha Gawade. And what are we going to discuss today, Anagha?
We are going to discuss how vitamin D and depression are related.
Yes. So I think we have many blogs on vitamin D,
Yes.
but yes, here we are going to focus on its role in depression.
Yeah.
Yes, so let's understand with basics of vitamin D and what it does in our body.
Yeah, so vitamin D is basically, we say it's a sunshine vitamin because, you say vitamin D, the main source of vitamin D is sunlight. So your sunlight exposure is correlated with your vitamin D. It is one of the part of it. Of course, we get vitamin D from various food sources also, like, red meat, fish, for that. Then there is eggs also. But yeah, vitamin D plays a very important role in our body because it's, first of all, it is important for calcium and phosphorus absorption, which is for maintaining our muscles and bone. Yeah, so vitamin D has shown its importance in reducing the inflammation, then controlling infectious diseases or conditions, and also in reducing the control of the cancer cell growth through recent studies. It has also shown its importance in psychological related conditions like anxiety, sadness, depressive symptoms, etc. So yeah.
Yes, and we also see that in India, if we focus on India for now, that many people are deficient in vitamin D. So, as you said, there are sources like red meat, fish, but when it comes to vegetarian people who do not consume meat, then the resources become restricted. And what I observe is, even though if we say that mushroom is a great source, it may be mushroom or may be an animal product, it needs that product itself needs to be exposed to sunlight, right? So it is either metabolized in our body or it is metabolized in the animal's body and then we consume it. Would you like to explain us like how vitamin D is metabolized?
So when I say that we get vitamin D from sunlight, it is that when our bodies are exposed to sun or the sunlight, we have something called as the 7-dihydroxycholesterol in our skin, right? Which absorbs the UV from the sunlight, and that is further converted to vitamin D3, which gets further converted to 1,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol. And that is what is important for us because that helps in the renal absorption of calcium and phosphorus, which is important for bone formation. And of course, then vitamin D, which is present, it also has other function. It acts as a steroid molecule for, in neuroprotection, neuroimmunomodulation, brain development. So yeah, that is also a part. So it is not just you are standing in sunlight, you will, of course, that plays a very important role, but there is a very biochemical mechanism which goes into formation of vitamin D3. So yes, of course, your dietary support of vitamin D3 is also important for having the optimum amount of vitamin D3 in your body.
Yes, so as you said, like sunlight itself is not the only source, or if we get sunlight, then we will surely have like enough of vitamin D is not necessary. It is like you said, it is a series of like biochemical
Yes.
reactions inside our body. So I think it also, how you mentioned about kidneys. So
Yeah.
our kidney health also plays a role
Yes.
here. I think there is one enzyme wherein like even the liver processes it, right?
Yes.
So even your liver health. So all these things along with I think the calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, the other micronutrients that help in the vitamin D absorption also plays a role, right? All right. So, like we have understood what vitamin D is, how it is important, how it is metabolized. So here we are talking about depression, right? Here we're touching depression. So before going to its interaction and its role, let's first understand what depression is.
Yeah, so depression, according to WHO, they define it as a mood disorder. So it is related with its symptoms. You can't define the depression, but it is the symptoms related to it. It is the feeling of worthlessness. You're continuously feeling low. There is no productivity. You are not interested into the enjoyable activities which you used to do earlier. Then there is loss of appetite, which reflects in your weight, your overall body weight. Then there is suicidal thoughts. Sometimes you're just, because you're feeling worthless, you're like, let's just end this over here. So yeah, so I think this is what depression is. It is a very a sensitive topic. But yeah, and this depression can be, triggered because of some biological, social, or psychological factors which is around you. So I think.
Very well put, Anagha. So, yes, it is a sensitive topic, and how we can address it, or how through nutrition, if we can help it in any way, would be great. And as you said, there are many factors that contribute to it. So, it may be, as you said, psychological, or social, or biological, or sometimes a combination of
Yeah.
these. So, at least we can help individuals with biological interventions. So that is where I think vitamin D plays a role.
Yes.
Let's understand through the biochemistry or the pathophysiology of depression, like where exactly vitamin D plays a role.
Yeah. Just as I said, vitamin D has a role in it acts as a steroid molecule for the neuroprotection and neuromodulation, right? So, interestingly, we have these hormones, serotonin and dopamine, wherein vitamin D plays a very important role in the production and secretion. So, according to studies, it has been shown that serotonin, which is required, it's like those happy hormones which are there. So, vitamin D is important for the synthesis and the activity of the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase, which is important for the synthesis of serotonin. So even in case of dopamine, so vitamin D upregulates the expression of tyrosine hydroxylase in the brain, and that is how in turn it affects the synthesis of dopamine. So I think vitamin D, although it is not directly related to it, but it is required as a cofactor for the enzymes to work out for the further synthesis of the hormones, etc.
Yes, and as you said, serotonin is the one that makes you feel good and happy. So yes, so if biologically, if it is being produced less, or it is being expended much more or highly, because in case of overthinkers, so one case could be that biologically serotonin or dopamine are being secreted less, or otherwise if we talk about the psychological factors, when in case of overthinkers, so people think a lot, and because of which a lot of serotonin is expended, which is why there is now less serotonin remaining in the system, which is why like vitamin D could help in generating more of serotonin and dopamine, right? I also read that it helps in decreasing the dopaminergic toxins. So, like all these hormones, neurotransmitters, these are necessary, but they also have their downsides. And when we talk about dopaminergic toxins, so it's helping, like vitamin D is helping reduce that. So, I think that is also a great thing. And indirectly, as you said, it also maintains the balance between the serotonin and dopamine. So, is it also a reason why there is seasonal depression, like during the winter time, because we do not get that much of the sunlight exposure, or if the sun is not that close, so even if we are exposed, if you track it, then you see the UVI index is quite low.
Yes.
So is it why? Because there is depression, or like
It-
seasonal depression?
We can say that because in winters, of course, there is less of sun exposure, and there is also people tend to go out less.
Yes.
It's winters, so people
Yes.
will be like very cozy inside their house. So that can be one of the reasons. There has been a study wherein it has been shown that their serotonin levels of the group of people were less because it during the winter season. So yes, the amount of your sunlight exposure directly correlates with serotonin and these hormones, and which in turn is a correlation between your depressive symptoms. I'm not directly saying depression, but depressive symptoms. So yeah, there is a correlation between them.
Okay.
There is also this when I say staying in the room indoors, people with depressive symptoms, of course, do that. They stay indoors, but there is also postpartum depression, wherein the study has also shown that people, because the women, they tend to stay inside indoors in the house, so there has also been low levels of vitamin D3 shown in them. So yeah, it is quite correlated.
Okay, so I think again that is one of the environmental factors
Yes.
contributing to it, but I think there's more to it to postpartum depression than just biological. And when you talk about winters and people stay in, especially in the regions where there is like harsh winter, especially the regions which are away from the equator.
Yes.
So they have like harsh winter seasons, snow, and I think the sun itself doesn't come that out, right? So it is difficult to get the optimum vitamin D3
Yes.
and sunlight in such regions at such times. Okay, so I also know an app which is called D Minder, which helps us track how much vitamin D we are synthesizing in like response to the amount of time spent in the sunlight. So it takes care of all the factors, your height, weight, the area, that like the amount of skin exposed to sun, and it also like you can also add supplemental doses in that. So it can like keep track of how much vitamin D ideally your body should synthesize. Again, there are different factors like skin types, because different skin types, different skin colors takes a different time to absorb that much vitamin D. And then there are also genes, right? So we all are different genetically, and even if we compare two people who are exposed to the same amount of sunlight at the same area or for the same period, the secretion or the synthesis of vitamin D would be different,
Yes.
right? Okay, so this is how we're tracking the vitamin D. This is one way, but as you said, sunlight, like obtaining sunlight is in itself not sufficient.
Yeah.
So how much of the vitamin D levels should we target at or should we aim for?
So according to the so when we say the optimal amount of vitamin D, the RDA given for a normal human being is 600 IU of vitamin D every day. In case of elderly people, people who are overaged, over 70 years, the RDA for them is 800 IU. The daily dose should be 600 IU for a normal person. If we go in case of pregnant woman, it will be 2000 IU, and the highest dose which a normal person can take is up to 4000 IU. So that is what it is. So then higher than that, it will be toxic.
Okay, so that is the tolerable point
Yes,
beyond
tolerable.
which it can lead to toxicity. And I didn't know like it is high for like older people.
Yeah, it
and
is high for older people because the amount of because their biochemical mechanism will be comparatively slower.
Right,
Yeah.
and not that efficient when we talk
Yes.
about liver and kidneys.
Yes.
If the organs are affected, then yes, that much of the vitamin D won't be synthesized. That's great. We like iThrive also has the vitamin D3 supplement with K2,
Yes.
which further helps the absorption of it. So how much of the vitamin D does it have in like one capsule?
So iThrive's vitamin D3 supplement had 400 IU per capsule of vitamin D.
Okay. And as I've heard that we are coming up with a liquid form
Yes.
to increase the absorption. So do you know anything about that product?
I think the liquid form will have around 600 IU, which is like the optimal, the RD
Per drop.
Per drop, yes.
Okay, so I think in cases of deficiencies, like people can exceed that and can aim for let's say
Yes.
1000 or 2000 IUs at a day, and again with discretion and looking at the blood parameters
Parameters.
first. Okay, so it also reminds me about one study that we had conducted in the past year to detect the efficacy of the vitamin D supplements. And when we plan the study, so there are many factors, like not just vitamin D, like how much skin is exposed. And I think when it comes to the practicality of conducting that study, it is difficult for each of the participant to note like how much time was exposed to the sunlight and how much part of the body was exposed to the area exposed. It's also like variable. And then there are factors like other supplementations when
Yes.
it comes to magnesium, let's say calcium, phosphorus, or B complexes. And like we have to look at the nutrients if they are interacting with the vitamin D composition. Okay, so summing it up, I think even you mentioned that it is correlation. So it is
Yeah.
association of vitamin D with depression,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, it is vitamin D. I'm not saying vitamin D is the causation of depression. It is not the causative factor. It is just a correlation which has been seen. So it is seen that people with depression or depressive symptoms have low levels of vitamin D. So it is just not that vitamin. If you are deficient in vitamin D3, you might have depression. No, it is not that. It's just a correlation, which has
Okay.
been seen in various studies.
Right. So I think the strength of the association here is not that great,
Yes.
and it is because like majority of the data that we obtain in this research area is obtained from cross-sectional studies.
Yes.
So this is where you're talking about there is a set of people who have depression and who versus who don't have.
depression.
And within that population we see their vitamin D levels. So
Yes.
those who had high and those who had less. And so the same follows for those who don't have depression. So this is like the reliability of the study, like the research conclusion is not that great as compared to, I think, the RCTs.
Yes.
So the randomized control trials. Yes. So summing it up, I think you mentioned that vitamin D and depression, they are not like a causative factor. Vitamin D is not a causative factor, and it is just correlated.
Yes.
Right. So would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah. So when I'm saying that, I'm not saying vitamin D3 is the reason why you have depression. It is just that in various cross-sectional studies, it has been found that people with depression or depressive symptoms had low levels of vitamin D. So it is not just that you have low, if you are deficient in vitamin D, you have depression. It is just a correlation between these two things.
Okay, and I think the strength of the studies here, like the strength of the association is not that great because of like a majority of the data that we derive in this research area is obtained from cross-sectional studies.
Yes.
So a cross-sectional study is where we distribute the participants into two groups. So let's say the first group has depression, the other group does not have depression, and within each group we then like further divide them into those who have like optimum levels of vitamin D and those who are deficient in vitamin D. So the same follows for even without depression. So the reliance of the data here is not that great as compared to randomized control trials. And the studies, like I found in one study that the RCT driven studies indicate that the effect of the vitamin D, the positive effect, is more like it is predominant in clinical depression.
Yes.
So when it is clinically diagnosed that a person has depression, so like the high levels of vitamin D supplementation was actually quite therapeutic in clinical depression as compared to subsyndromal depression, which is just a couple of symptoms of depression. Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered everything about vitamin D and its relation to depression, and also touched a few parts of research skills here. So thank you, Anagha, for this beautiful podcast.
You're welcome.
Yes. So thank you all for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Until then, like, follow, and listen to previous podcast, and go ahead and read our blogs. Thank you.